Hello, everybody. Welcome to Making Noise, a community musician production where we bring you the stories behind the songs, the grit behind the glory, and the heart behind the hustle. Each episode, I sit down with a working musician or band, someone who's navigating this industry on their own terms, to hear what hasn't been told, the struggles, the surprises, the detours, and the breakthroughs. Today, I am deeply honored to welcome Matt McDonald of the trance arena rock band Perpetual Groove. Matt has been part of PGroove through many phases, the early growth years, some growing pains, and continual evolution. We'll talk about his personal journey, the creative decisions behind the music, and what it takes to keep going in a changing world, and where he and the band are headed. Matt, welcome to Making Noise. Thank you so much for being here. Why don't we start by having you introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners, for those who don't know you, where you come from, where the band started, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Ashley. I appreciate it. Like you said, I'm Matt. I grew up down in Naples, Florida. In 1998, I had joined the military as a musician after college and was stationed right outside of Savannah, Georgia. At that same time as I was getting out in late 2001, Brock and Adam in the band were graduating Savannah College of Art and Design. And Albert had gotten to the Army band about a year before that. And so the way it worked out is that we all just met at an open mic night in Savannah that Brock and Adam were hosting down at JJ Cagney's. And yeah, the rest, as they say, is history. We were very lucky. Within a year, we had a manager and we were starting to play outside of Savannah, obviously, and hit Atlanta and Charleston and all those markets. And it only grew from there.
What year were we in when you got rolling?
It was really like late 2000, I think, or excuse me, it was early 2001 because I had just come back from a deployment in Bosnia and met Brock and Adam down at the open mic night. So it would have been 2001. In the summer of 2002, we were recording our first album outside of Atlanta and Marietta, and that came out in January 2003 was the first album.
I am curious. I'll be aging myself, I guess, a little bit by telling you this, but at that time I was, around graduating high school, and I worked at a local record store, CD store rather, where I live, and kind of went from being bustling retail location to 2 years later, I was there as they were closing them down because streaming, the early days of streaming were quickly approaching, kind of out of nowhere for many. I'm curious, at the time, as you were getting rolling, as you looked around at the industry and environment, what were you thinking at that time as you were starting to record and make music professionally?
Things were going so fast for the band at that point that I don't know how much I was paying attention to the industry so much. I was able to sit back a couple years later, by the time we're doing our second and then third albums, to have a better feel as for what was going on. The first time we saw our album up on Napster, it was kind of cool in that way because it was still that neat discovery era. That meant people were checking us out. But I also remember how much we relied on CD sales at the shows because people still bought physical, CDs at the time. My biggest, as far as where it was then and where it is now, the thing that blows my mind is like people are paying $10 or $11 usually for their streaming service monthly. And that's for, all the songs in the world pretty much that are available. We used to pay $17, $20 for one CD from one band for one album. And if we would pay that much now for the streaming service monthly, it could drastically change the lives of current working musicians. But at that time, people were still focusing on using, like on our third album, Live, Love, Die, we did it all with soy inks and tried to, people were doing renewable energy credits. RECs at the time was the big hot thing. So we were trying to be progressive in that sense, but I don't think any of us saw exactly what having the whole catalog of world music in your pocket on your supercomputer was heading our way at that time. So, yeah.
If anyone that's listening, search the internet for American jam bands, they're going to come across Perpetual Groove. I don't want to put you in a box, but you certainly fit in that category of that type of touring band. You're out playing. You have a pretty diehard audience that is happy to come to multiple shows over and over, see you play, see how your set changes. Did you know from those early days that that was the type of band that Perpetual Groove was going to be?
Yeah, it was pretty obvious that we were getting, and I like the jam band thing. I wear, I'm not ashamed of it or anything like that. To me, especially at this point, with all the music that's kind of lumped into the jam band scene, it feels like the live music scene, like
Yeah.
actual touring working musicians that still take risk on stage and aren't just doing the same performance every night. Hats off to those acts that are a performance act and go do this high production thing every night. That's its own set of challenges. But this is more, getting together with your friends, not just the ones on stage, but the ones in the audience, and having this symbiotic relationship and transference of energy between the fans and the band that you might not get at the high production performance. But whereas you might be really impressed with that kind of show, you might leave our kind of show more inspired than impressed. I love the jam band community. I love the scene, everything about it. Yeah.
Your early days before you met your counterparts, did you know that music is how you wanted to spend your life professionally?
Yeah. There was never, it's not even like it was a choice. It was just it was pretty early, like 7 years old when I was taking early piano lessons that I would read the music and that would be fun and all. Not really fun, but I was learning that aspect. The release and the emotional, the way I was able to let stuff out sitting at the piano, especially without music, that started happening at a really young age. Just understanding, what keys sounded nice together and what ones didn't, and how that was pretty cool too.
And so were you in bands in your younger days?
I mean, as early as middle school, I think sixth grade, probably like the first GarageBand. And then I played with those guys. It was a lot of fun. We recorded an album. I think we were 15 or 16. We were like freshmen in high school making an album, playing clubs. My dad would have to come and be our chaperone and they'd X all of our hands, but the local clubs liked our band. We'd come play all the hits then in the late 80s, early 90s, So we were peak grunge cover bands and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun.
So in your early days, I think especially as a young man, as a teenager, and then, as a young man in his early 20s, let's say, I'm going to make the assumption that you're out there having fun. Like, at what point did you start thinking about, or did you start thinking about, how do I make sure this is sustainable, like as a lifestyle? When did you start thinking about that, planning around that concept?
I really love cooking as well. And I always had when I was a kid, and I was working at a chart house restaurant in Naples to kind of pay the bills, and I would gig. And then they offered me to essentially go to their general manager school and everything. And I was like, if I do that, that's going to be it. So I made the decision at that time to join the military so I could, because they needed musicians. And yeah, it was great. It was a wonderful decision. At the time when I joined, I thought I'd be a studio musician maybe when I got out. But I was in from 98 to '02, and that colored old iMac came out during that time, and you had your iteration of GarageBand. And I remember the cover of Studio Electronic Musician or Home, one of the old magazines. I forget which one, but it said the end of the recording studio was the time, because the birth of the home studio was basically happening.
Okay, I have a few ways I want to take this. But first, you said that the military needed musicians. Is that what you said?
At the time, they definitely needed piano players.
Okay, tell me more about that. As a very ignorant Canadian,
Sure.
tell me a little more about that. I'm just curious.
It was great. I mean, not only did you get the GI Bill, but they paid all college loans that were outstanding for you once you finished training. But I went to boot camp like everybody. And then you go to your training school, which is called AIT, where they basically train you to do your job that you're going to do. Obviously, as a musician, you have to have some. That's why there was an audition process and all that before I officially joined the military. And then you're there. You're at the School of Music for about 6 months, and they shove the 4-year Berklee program down your throat in about that amount of time, whatever it was in late 90s at least. And some folks come right out of high school. A lot of us were coming out of college. And the instructors at the School of Music, Doc Severson, who used to play with Johnny Carson band, he was an instructor for the Navy there. There was all these cats that played in all these different bands that were the instructors. And when you learn about the music military system, it's actually a pretty great gig if you're a musician that wants to play that sort of stuff, or are content playing that. And there's all sorts of different, we touched a little bit on everything from, your concert stuff to what you would expect for marching, change of command ceremony type music, John Philip Sousa type stuff. But also there's a jazz band that would play a lot, especially at all the commanders' balls and everything like that. But we were public facing a ton of the time, doing stuff out in the public. So it was great. It was a cool experience. I met my wife while I was in there. She's a musician in the military as well. So, I didn't re-enlist. There was a point where my creative needs and the structure of the military music program wasn't going to be a long-term fit, but it was just right for me to get a little more disciplined probably in my personal life and to know the things I could do across the board. And I think, I've never had anything negative about that experience. I did deploy a couple times and everything, and that was unique in its own way and gave me an only deeper appreciation and gratitude for the life of a musician and to pursue it with more gumption after those experiences. But yeah.
So do you think there was something related to your background that helped? I mean, obviously you had your bandmates as well, but you said you found a manager within the first year and were getting rolling. Tell me a little bit more about those early days and kind of what you were thinking about in terms of setting the stage to get your career going.
There's a lot of things in my personal life all happening at once at that time, but I think all of us were just so along for the ride, and where it was like we didn't approach. Ben Ferguson was our manager, and he was another guy at SCAD that was just, he had a hustle too. He had that hustler mentality, like in the good way, to go out. I think today's kids get that mentality a little bit more. We have a market and a society that respects the hustler mentality. And so that's what we were doing, all opportunities were on the table. If it felt right, we did it. And I don't know that we were thinking too much down the line at that. I think we were just for the ride, and it was very fast in those 4 or 5 years.
What were you, how were you spending most of your time those first 4 or 5 years? Were you touring like frequently on a bus, in a van? What were your weeks looking like?
I mean, we, like all bands, we started in a van, and I can't remember. There was one year where we did over 200 shows, and we were road dogs. We were on the road all the time, most 4 to 6 weeks long, and there were a few of those a year. By 2006, we were in the bus, and so those runs actually started to get longer because we covered more ground. It was a lot without any of us coming up to catch our breath for air for a few years. And then when we finally started to kind of look around and maybe feel the grind, all the passe rock and roll things were coming into place by then. So yeah, that's when we started to reassess how we were doing things and where we wanted to go, and started to take all that a little more seriously, but not immediately. It took all the, like I said, the rock and roll stuff to happen first before we started to focus in on what works for Perpetual Groove.
And for folks who are maybe less familiar with your story and history, during this time, were you signed? Were your songs playing on the radio? Or were you just building an organic sort of fan following? What sort of a trajectory were you looking at that time?
I mean, there were a lot of folks helping us. We had a great record label, but it was a partnership more than the traditional record label setup. Tree Leaf Records at the time was coming out, Tree Sound Studios in Atlanta. And so we had a great recording deal with a room that, Elton John was recording in the week before. It was just, we had this incredible top tier studio essentially at our use. So it wasn't the most traditional setup when it came to that, but it gave us access to a creative space. But I'm sorry, I think I forgot the second part of your question.
That's okay. I'm just curious about if you were taking a more independent route.
Yeah, it was always that way. We've never signed a major label or anything like that. We've had tour support with certain sponsorships in the past, but nothing that, footed the entire bill of the tour or anything like that. So it's always been an organic fan base thing, for sure.
Was that a goal? Was it a goal of yours to stay independent?
I don't know that it was the goal, is what just always made the most sense. There was never an offer where we were going to give up so much, because we were pretty happy with the way things were. I can't think of any business deals that we've signed ever that I felt like it was not beneficial to us when it came to that side of it. And we just heard so many horror stories, people pursuing major label stuff or getting, in debt because of it instead of it helping. We just never found ourselves in a position that we felt like we had to do something like that.
When you started reflecting a bit on life on the road and what the toll that was, what sort of next steps were important for you? I think that you have had some hiatus moments where you took some breaks and decided to come back. How did you determine priorities as a band, as a collective, which moves to make? I'm assuming you said you met your wife early days. I'm assuming there's a point where people are looking at family, figuring out how to balance like home life with road life.
Right. There's only so many birthdays and soccer games that you miss before you start to reevaluate what's what. And we all did that in our own way. I mean, we're even going through it right now. It was just announced a couple days ago that our original drummer Albert's coming back to the band, which is great. And just like I did from '08 to 11, I took a break, stepped away for a little bit. And then the whole band took a couple of years off. I think it was 13 to 15. And it's just, you learn to understand your limits and what it is. And since we've come back in 2015, Albert took a couple of years off. It was post-pandemic thing. As we were coming out of the pandemic, I think we all had to weigh things and where we were at, globally. I think we all did a little bit. We're constantly reevaluating what works for the band and where we're at. And so right now, I think we're probably in the best spot we've been in a long time because nobody has to be here anymore. We all want to be here. Everybody has other things that they do, which is great. But we show up to Perpetual Groove there's a lot of gratitude in the room and a lot of enthusiasm. Whereas if you were to go back to 2007 or a period in 2011 and 2012, the grind had just wears on your personality. You can only be around the same group of folks for so long before something starts to annoy you.
Yeah.
So there's all those parts. We've all gotten better. You get wiser with age, of course, but I think we've all learned to work with our own nervous systems a lot more and just healthier living across the board, I think helps with that. Like I said, those early there's always some sort of, too much alcohol or too much whatever could be an equation in the evening. Never on stage, but if you're climbing into the same 50-foot steel tube that you're going to be stuck in for the next 12 hours with those people, like I said, it can start to wear on you, which is, standard. You hear this with all bands at one point or another. So,
yeah. Life on the road, I can only imagine it's probably, for those who don't do it, it's sort of a very romantic idea in some ways. I know for myself, I've always thought, man, that would be pretty cool. But I do wonder about sort of this new generation of emerging artists as they're starting to hit the road. And, you've taken breaks and things have changed so fast. Every 5 years, I'm sure feels very different in terms of just where the world is. And a theme I keep hearing about for artists who really are intent on playing live shows like regular and that be a key component to their musical career. It's expensive. It's getting harder. The logistics can be a little bit more complicated, even as technology sort of makes, in some ways, it easier to book, a place to stay at XYZ, whatever. For yourselves, you've been doing it for so long, so maybe there's sort of a little sense of comfort. But I'm wondering, has touring gotten harder in any way from that perspective as a band? And what do you think about for this next generation of touring artists?
It's a completely different world. There's a fellow who's coming out on the road with us working crew, and he's in a great younger band here in Athens as well. And just in discussion with him, he was talking about, well, right now between shows while we work on getting some dates, we're just focusing on that Instagram. And I'm like, like I can't even, it's the last thing I want to focus on for sure. We should be spending more time focusing on that probably. But, we were so word of mouth and traditional flyers. And one of the things that we did very early on is and CD duplicating had become a thing. And since people like to collect in jam band world, they like to get the live shows. We would record our live shows, and then instead of using traditional flyers, we'd go get a few hundred blank CDs, and we had like a 10 disc tower burner, and you could burn 10 discs at a time. We'd sit there and we'd put all our upcoming shows on the labels for the CDs. And we were like, look how innovative this is at that time. And now everything is definitely built around a social media profile and telling a story and having a whole personality that doesn't really necessarily have anything to do with the music. So for these kids today, it's just a completely different terrain. There was some great young Athens bands right before the pandemic hit that I was like, 100%, these are some of those bands that are going to be on the way. And pandemic hit, and there was no way for them to sustain. With us, at least, we had been an entity on the business side of it for a long time. So we were qualified for all sorts of assistance and everything to help out. But, if you're a band that was younger than 5 years old, you didn't qualify for any of that. It's completely different, and it's because of social media. The way we digest media and information is completely different than it was 25 years ago. Next year's 25 years for the band officially. So we're planning some stuff, and just even promotions in the way we used to do them, how it is now, it's just a completely different beast. One has nothing to do with the other, really.
You did mention that in your early days, though, you really took on a mentality that embraced the hustle. And it does seem today that new artists really have to be hybrid. They have to be artists and they have to be entrepreneurs and business people and representing their interests in a variety of ways. Do you think you would have decided to take on the artist's journey had you been starting in 2025?
I just don't know. I don't know if my old man, 50-year-old mind can get and adjust to what the world must look like through 22-year-old eyes right now. That's a good question, because I really don't love the social media aspect of some of the things we have to do. I'll do the videos and all that when our marketing, I mean, even now, we don't have a lot of the roles that we maybe had 20 years ago in the band as far as the team goes, but we still have a marketing director and, somebody that helps guide the socials for us and all that. And just the general, dissemination of promotional materials and all that sort of stuff. But we were lucky with that first manager where he was really great at perception and graphic art and everything like that. So he can make us look a lot cooler than we were. And we didn't have to get in front of a camera and show ourselves for our actual selves at any time. We had been a band for 6 years before even the first iPhone came out. So a lot of that we missed on the early part of social media. And I don't know that we've ever, and this isn't a good thing that I'm saying, but I don't know that we've ever committed, or any of the four of us have been like, I'll be the one to take on socials, because I don't think any of us naturally have a feel for it.
It's a completely different thing, but I suppose for a lot of folks, if they're coming out of high school or college, it's so native for them in many ways.
I can remember it being cool to see myself on video for the first time, much less a Polaroid picture or something. That was like high-speed technology when I was a kid. And then the first time that you did a FaceTime call, it's like, whoa, this is the Jetsons. We're there.
I think your band has taken some interesting, innovative approaches, though. You mentioned the burning of the CDs, which I'm sure, of course, at some point, lots of groups and artists and even consumers, of course, were doing that. But to embrace it and to take it on and to look at new ways, like you said, to record your live shows is very cool. I noted that in the I think it was around 2015, correct me, you did a Kickstarter campaign, I think, to help fund one of your albums.
Yeah.
Is that right?
We did. We did one Kickstarter campaign, the one we'll ever do. And it was successful. And they're really lucky that the fans did. But, you had to get creative, did it with it. Brock did the Bob Ross thing that we did, the promotional videos. And yeah, it was fun. And even in the super early days on the technology side, like, GPS things were becoming new. So we would do these GPS coordinates for free tickets in the town that we're in, where we would have had some tickets and stuff like that. And yeah, even we didn't get to do it, but like we were going to do this music festival, Amberland, a couple of years ago and bring it back. And then the pandemic kind of messed all that up. But one of the things that we were going to have there was give you a simple QR code you scanned at the gate, and then it would activate this NFC thing that was all over the grounds. So you'd kind of play this scavenger hunt for new songs and hidden tracks through different parts of the campgrounds and through the festival area. There's all sorts of stuff with technology that we still like to embrace and utilize. It's just the social media part of putting yourself out there has always been a little bit of a challenge.
The self-funding part is really interesting, though, especially for indie artists. And I'm thinking that more and more artists today are looking at what are their opportunities. And you mentioned, of course, the sort of in-house studio is kind of, I'm assuming in many ways, the standard for so many artists now versus going in studio. I'm thinking from that cost perspective, like we don't need to get into the specific numbers, but what's the endeavor look like today to try to put together a new album, get it out there and have it at the standard that you want it at today versus 15 years ago? Do you look at this as something that is more accessible, something that more people can take on and take a leap and give it a try?
Yeah, I do. I think it's all much easier to do at home. A lot of stuff, especially if you're maybe an electronic musician or a keyboard player like I am, you don't necessarily need a good room. We still go to a studio and try to track live as far as all of us in the room playing together. There's just a thing that happens that it's hard to do when you're separated, but especially things like drums, we still use, real drums because we have an actual drummer. So recording stuff like that can be much trickier to do at a home studio. So we still go studio for that aspect of it. But then when you get into overdubs or extra parts you might want to do on top of what we captured from the floor, if you will, with all four of us there, that stuff you can do at home and not be paying for the studio time and then bring it all to mix. Essentially, we still use a producer to do mixing and mastering and all that. We trust our ears as far as what we know we like, but to have the best perspective on our music, we enjoy somebody that maybe isn't as attached to any of the parts.
I'm thinking about community, and it seems like your choices as a band, your opportunities as a band, and your resilience as a band in making more new music and having successful live shows to this day and planning for the future. It seems like community has been what's been able to ground Perpetual Groove and serve as a foundation through all the changes that you may have experienced. And that might be the big difference, I think, compared to others, folks creating community online today and you having that organic in-person community. And sorry to make this so long-winded, but as we were chatting before we got rolling, you mentioned like your fans have made certain things easy for you. The short, version of Perpetual Groove, PGroove, kind of came from them. Trance Arena Rock, that kind of label came from them. And so a lot of things has come through the community in many ways to help you become where you are today as a band. Can you speak a little bit to community and sort of what it's meant for you?
Absolutely. I'd say all the best things about us have come from the community, not the support that they've shown to the band, but what they built around the band, more importantly, with each other. There's people that are close personal friends for a long time now where we definitely met at a show, early on. They were early supporters or something like that. There's folks that we met separately in different cities who now are raising kids together. And, we've watched all the parts happen around the band, but the community is what keeps it going for any band, especially for this one. There's something special. We wear our heart on our sleeves a bit. Brock's lyrics tend to do that and bring that out, which I think is beautiful part of it because there's not a whole lot of asking about what the lyrics mean because they're all, Brock writes and Adam both write so great in this. It's going to mean what it does to the individual on the subjective experience. And I think that the community is bonded around a lot of that vibe that comes from setting that kind of safe space, to let the heart open up a little bit.
I mean, obviously, your fans and your community are going to first and foremost come for the music, as you say. It's got to resonate with them. They have to love it. It needs to mean something for them. I'm curious if there's anything that you've done intentionally as a way to connect with that fan base beyond, what someone that doesn't know Perpetual Groove might not assume.
Early on, before maybe all of us had the families, that with wives and children and everything that required our attention and commitment, we would do stuff like Thanksgiving in Winston-Salem at Ziggy's, where Thanksgiving weekend we'd do potlucks before the shows so all the fans could come and we could, break bread together. Like I said, we used to do this music festival, Amberland, when it was a lot easier to do music festivals. And we would bring friends on. But it started as just us for the weekend, doing 3 sets a day, for a couple nights and having fun, hanging out with, making some of those deeper relationships with the fan base. Nowadays, we're so focused on just bringing that vibe of anything, like it's a place where you can feel whatever you need to feel. And we're trying to create that space at all times. And so when I look out and I see somebody singing along to the lyrics, whether they be happy or I see them maybe shedding a tear, I have to look down and focus on playing. Because if I get too caught up in them, I'll start to feel it in this overwhelming sense of gratitude because of people just sharing all of us in the space, sharing that energy together. I think that's part of what makes PGroove a little special. Like I said, is that we're not afraid to sing about the things that we all feel. So that everyone can experience at one point or another. So.
I really appreciate that. I think part of the reason I ask is to know, your story, but also to sort of put it out there into the universe. So folks who are listening, especially younger artists, their version of how they connect with their fans might be different, but that sort of intentionality and finding their own way of having that intentional connection with their fans, just to do something a little extra for those diehard fans, I think is really meaningful and really important to share that the spirit of that matters, and how it is interpreted or how it's activated, like, is going to perhaps be different, but the spirit of it could be the thread that connects artists who manage to have long-standing careers. So that's really, really cool.
When I spoke earlier about the symbiotic relationship between the band and the fans, that's a special energy that is almost ineffable when you're in the presence of it for that moment. And so our gratitude to the fans, I think, is expressed best in those moments where we're all just connected together. I hope that they feel that gratitude because, like I said, it's very difficult to put words to that moment. But when we're all sitting there together in it, I hope that it means to them what it does to us, for sure.
What's your life look like in 2025, 2026? Like, how many shows are you generally doing in, say, a given month or a given year as an average? What does your life look like now?
Manageable amount. Usually a few shows over the course of a weekend, sometimes 2 weekends if it makes sense. If it makes sense, like this next week, I'll be going to the Northeast for 4 shows, just right. I'll be on the road for 6 days total from the time I leave to the time I get back home. And that's all very manageable. And then I won't be out again until almost like right before Thanksgiving, the weekend before Thanksgiving. So I'll be home for a few weeks to do all that and be here with the kids. Both my kids are middle school and high school right now, the ones at home. And so my wife and I are busy. But yeah, I do some integration work here at home with clients and stuff like that as well with folks, breath work, meditation, sound baths, stuff like that. We all have, like I said, other avenues when we're at home. Yeah. So Perpetual Groove is like a weekend, maybe 2 weekends a month, which is awesome because we still get to do it and it's fun. Yeah, but it looks a lot more manageable nowadays. Now, December, I will say I've got like a dozen shows in December because sometimes that's just how that works out too.
Busier season, more events, things are going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. You clearly have people that follow you, or, around the country, or at least if you're in the region that they live in. But you must be meeting new fans. You must be having new people coming to your shows. Otherwise, I imagine you wouldn't be able to pursue booking shows, month after month after month. How does that feel, getting new fans as they might be seeing you for the first time at your next show?
It's the best. I always love it when especially if it's a new younger fan, get to meet them. A lot of the times, not all the time, but I love it when this does not happen. But a lot of the times feel like, my dad loved you guys in college. Something like that.
Yeah.
Old enough as a band now where we're hearing that. But and we'll see even the families, like folks we've known for a while, bringing their kids to a show, which is awesome. The fact that the whole family wants to come out and see our silly little band means it's a big, big night out for them. And so that's always cool. Sometimes when you're doing it too much, you forget that the people out there, this is their night out. They've come out to do this thing, not just to support you, but to take part in a celebration of life, whatever that means for that evening. And they trust us to show up for it. And it's awesome. So when younger folks are getting turned on to it, that's always fantastic as well.
And I have to ask then, so younger folks tuning in to Perpetual Groove, they're I'm assuming so many of them are finding your music on streaming platforms. If you weren't touring, would you consider yourself a professional musician at this point? And what I mean by that is, to me, it seems like the fundamental thing about Perpetual Groove is the fact that you're out playing. Now, if you're getting new fans and they're listening on streaming platforms, it's wonderful. They're hearing your music, but that isn't necessarily benefiting you as an artist besides sharing your music. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, I think so. That's a good question. I mean, I do other things outside of Perpetual Groove musically still, to where I would definitely consider myself a professional musician still. But, a touring musician can be a very different thing. And musicians will point that out to each other. The guy that's a professional musician at the local Philharmonic for the city that they live in is very much a professional musician. They are not a touring musician though. And you're built out of different stuff for sure. Because the touring aspect, like we were talking earlier, is you have to be carved out of something different to do it and to still love it. There's parts of it that are definitely hard, like we were talking about, but there's also moments that I wouldn't trade for the world, and not even the ones on stage. I remember once we were taking the bus across the northwestern part of Washington down into Oregon, and we made the bus driver pull over because we were going by this lake with these mountains and a purple hue in the sky at sunset. And we all just stepped out of the bus for about a half hour, went to our own little areas along the lake there. And it was, one of the most profound moments of my life that'll stick with me forever, because there's no other vehicles around, just on this random road in the Pacific West, just getting blown away.
I think maybe the thing I'm not asking you is around the monetization of your music and the monetization of your work, right? And so, clearly that's part of it, right? If you were going to be committing your life, obviously people are going to create. If they're musicians, they're going to create. But to be able to build a life off of your music. And of course, you have, like you say, there's other things you do within the spectrum of your professional world, but through specific initiatives or projects or bands or albums, this idea of being able to financially benefit off of it. And I think in some ways it feels almost like a dirty topic to talk about monetizing art, but in the 2025 leading into 2026, we're looking at a whole new world with AI generated music, streaming platforms that are perhaps providing access to music where there's no financial benefit except for the streaming platforms potentially. And just thinking about how you're thinking about this. I mean, you're in a position in life where maybe it's not as fundamentally important, but for the next generation of artists or the folks who are 5 years in, finally getting some momentum and now feeling like they're at a turning point where they need to start earning money. If they're not touring, or if they're touring and it's expensive, what are they doing? And so I'm just wondering how and if you're thinking about that. Obviously, our conversations have started around some of the things we're working with merchandise. What kind of advice would you give to someone getting started right now, and to make sure they're able to work on the things that they love and not be starving artists?
Turn on sync licensing. Try to get that if you can. It's not when we started, it was still kind of taboo to put your song in a commercial or anything like that. But allow that. Everybody's doing it. See, I'm probably the wrong person to ask for this, because I think if I had put that in any of my top 5 things at any point in my career, I probably would have been like, well, you're crazy for doing this and you should stop right now and go get a stable, normal job with insurance. I would hate for somebody to take their eye off the ball of what this is really about, which is creative act, instead of feeling like, just know you're going to have to hustle a bunch of different hustles probably if you're going to step into this. If you try to put all your eggs in one basket and be like, this is the only thing I'm going to do and I'm going to do it this way, good luck. I don't have advice on how to do it because I've never done it and never made it a pursuit or a goal. Not that it shouldn't be for folks. Sorry, I'm probably not giving you the answer you want.
No, that's honest. That's the point.
Honestly, if I had ever put those kind of goals in front of it, I don't know that I would have ever started it. It was such a deeper, like I said, I don't think I ever had too much of a choice in the matter. It's like, if there's any sort of unified field or divine intervention, it was, you're here to do this, boy. And that's pretty much been the marching orders I got from day one. when it comes to music. And I've just been lucky that I've mostly been able to do it for a living. But, I guess I did join the military as a musician, so I was willing to do whatever it took to be able to play,
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to know what you're thinking about going into 2026. You said you've got a returning original member. Tell the audience a little bit about what they can look forward to with Perpetual Groove.
Next year's 25 years of PGroove. There's going to be a bunch of shows that are going to be announced that will be commemorating that regionally all over the country. I think I can talk about it's going to be announced soon. So it's not a big deal if I start talking about it, but the Hotel Indigo here in Athens has a really incredible live room in it called the Rialto Room. Peter Buck from REM and Kevin Kinney from Driving and Crying have done some shows there and everything. And hugely intimate. I think we're going to sell about 150 tickets each night. But we're going to do a full electric set still, but it's going to be a bit of a Perpetual Groove Storytellers, where we're going to go through the catalog and the songs that have great stories behind them. We're going to do a couple nights of that. There's going to be some late night events happening as well. We've done a package deal with Hotel Indigo, so any fans that travel be able to come in on the Saturday afternoon. We're going to do like a meet and greet cocktail party, some fun stuff. I think the guys and I might do our version of Hot Ones. We got the sauce. We got the whole seasonal pack. Yeah, it should be fun. That's going to be kind of the kickoff. And then there's some other things that I know I cannot talk about yet that are going to be part of the 25 years. So really next year's, the big focus is going to be 25 years of PGroove. We're doing 2 nights at Meow Wolf again in Denver, which is awesome. That's going to be in April. I think we're going to do Memorial Day weekend at the Poorhouse in Charleston, South Carolina. There's all sorts of cool stuff. For next October of 2026, we're working on something in Savannah that I think has potential to be really big.
So if people want to follow and hear these announcements as they come, where can they find Perpetual Groove and your updates?
I think we're at Perpetual Groove on Instagram and Facebook and all that.
For folks listening, I'll make sure to link your, website and social channels in the show notes so they can find that. And I do recommend people checking out your music. Can I ask, do you know off the cuff, like how many recorded songs approximately has Perpetual Groove put out?
That's a good question. 3, 4, there's 5 official albums, but then there's a few EPs. So there's probably 40 or 50 in there, I'm guessing. Full song catalogs, definitely over 100. A lot of stuff doesn't make it to the albums.
I will also share in the show notes your links to where they can find your music, of course,
Great.
Because we want people listening. And Perpetual Groove has also been experimenting with some of our merch products to help share their music, recordings of their live shows with their collectible music cards, which has been really fun. So we love that you're giving those a try, and those are going to be available at your shows. So folks who want to see what those are about. But I want to say that my big takeaway from our conversation here about the success of Perpetual Groove, and I know there's been lots of ups and downs along the way, but your ability to be here decades in, its community foundation with like that connection with your fans and your audience and how you prioritize that, and a lot of adaptability. It sounds like, as a band, being adaptable as life changes, as things happen, and prioritizing, it sounds like the music and just making the art. And that's the thing that drives you.
Has to be the driving force. Has to be that.
Yeah.
I am excited about the community musician posters. After our Zoom the other day, I got out right because I had looked at it, I was like, cool poster. I had no idea at first. And then so scanning a poster and having the show come up is pretty brilliant. I'm excited to share this with the fan base.
Thank you. This might be the first time that's been shared publicly, but the idea, that's okay. No, that's great. We're experimenting too along the way. And really our goal is to help provide bands and artists with ways to bring value to their fans through their music. And you guys are getting really creative with your music, especially with your live show recordings, which is super cool and really fun. And we're really enjoying being a part of that. Matt, thank you so much for your time. Really inspired by everything that you're doing. And when you get up to Canada, I'm gonna watch you.
You're on the
But I'll be yeah,
way over there. Yeah.
I'm way on the other side, but I'll be down, at one point or another.
Awesome.
And this has been really fun. Thank you so much for sharing a bit about your story, your personal story, Perpetual Grooves. This is really fun with Making Noise. Everyone, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate it.